It's my pleasure to present Dr. Mustafa Al-Mousawi. He is the head of Kuwait Organ Recruitment Unit, a consultant transplant surgeon at Hamad Al Isa Organ Transplant Center in Kuwait, Vice President of Kuwait Transplant Society, Member Ethics Committee in the Transplantation Society and Middle East Society for Organ Transplantation, and a member of Council Asian Society of Transplantation. And he's going to talk to us about ethics of regulated living and related transplantation. Dr. Mustafa, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Now, when we talk about regulated living and related transplantation, we want to differentiate it from the well-known organ trade, which is unregulated and which is well known in several parts of the world, in which the donor is usually used without looking after him, without giving him his rights, or without proper investigation and follow-up. Now, when we talk about living unrelated donation, we know that we are talking about it because we have a problem of organ shortage, and because not enough organs are available from living donors or from deceased. This problem has arisen, whether you call it a problem or you call it an issue. Now, living unrelated transplantation has proved that it has good results because you can plan it beforehand. It is, if you compare it to the deceased donor, the results are better. There is no waiting time. Like in deceased donation, you have to wait sometimes for several years to get a kidney. And it saves money because patients on dialysis cost a lot of money for individuals, for insurances, or for governments. And it saves lives because it is proven that people on the waiting list for kidneys, and if you extend it even for liver, if you extend it for living unrelated liver donation, then we know that many people are dying on the waiting list, waiting for a kidney or for a liver. And by doing living unrelated transplantation, you increase the number of transplants in your departments, and you remove people from the waiting list, and you remove them from being on dialysis. So these are a lot of advantages for living unrelated donor transplantation. In Kuwait, we have shown, and you can see that in yellow, that since we opened the door for living unrelated transplantation just over 10 years ago, the number of transplants have increased over the years. But what are the usual donor motives when a donor who's unrelated? Why should he donate to somebody who is not blood relative? Of course, there could be some emotional relationship, and we all know that a spouse, a wife or a husband, can be a donor to his partner or his spouse. And this is, I think, widely accepted, and I personally don't consider it as unrelated because wife and husband are related to each other by marriage. Now, the emotional relationship can also extend to friends. And here, of course, you have to put the friends in between brackets. We have to know how long has the friendship been continued. Is it a long-term friendship, or is it a short-term? Is the friendship so strong that a friend can give a kidney to his friend? And the second category is altruism, pure altruism. Every now and then you find a person who wants to do something good to anybody without even meeting him or without even knowing him. He wants to do something. Since I can donate one of my kidneys and that will not affect my health, I want to help others. So there are every now and then people who would like to donate for the sake of altruism. Are these many? I think these are very few, but they are there. In some countries, they are called Good Samaritans. And here in this country, we say, تبرع لوجه الله. They are donating for the sake of God. And the third motive is commercialism. Giving a kidney or part of a liver in return for money. This is, I've highlighted it or I've made it in bold because this is a big issue when you come to living unrelated transplantation. What is wrong with commercialism? What is wrong with paying somebody for giving his kidney to somebody else? I think many of you probably know Dr. Arthur Matus, who is a well-known transplant surgeon in the United States, and he advocates opening the door for paying for kidneys. He has got an argument, and I'm sure if you go to the internet or to various places, you will know his arguments. And he says you have to regulate it. You have to open the door and regulate it. By regulating it, you make it legal, so you get rid of the underworld business of organ trade, which is, became or is still ongoing in many countries. It is regulated by the government, so the government is opening the door, and either the government agencies or non-government organizations. So it is a regulated system for the living unrelated donors. So what happens to the donor? Are they paid or not paid? Well, in certain countries, like in Kuwait, paying the donor is not allowed by law. The law forbids buying or selling kidneys. But then somebody can say, I am a friend and I want to donate with no return. So you meet such a donor and you interview him, and you might accept his offer of donation on the basis of either emotional relationship or on the basis of altruism. And others, and Dr. Matas, he says that we should pay the donor. Others say let us pay the donor directly without any middle people, preserving the right of the donors and giving them the best possible support and care. And I think the Iranian model is well known for many years of a government-regulated payment of the donor. Now, as we said, in such a regulated system, the donor should be assured of good quality of care before donation, full investigations, and also, of course, long-term follow-up. And at the end, Arthur Matas says that this system will save a lot of lives of people on the waiting list and saves a lot of money spent on treatment of end-stage kidney disease such as dialysis and so on. But there are a lot of concerns, of course. The concerns are ethical, religious, and medical. What are these concerns? There are real concerns of the real motives for donation when somebody says, I want to donate on an altruism basis. There's a lot of a real concern of the abuse of the poor and needy. Somebody comes who's in need of money, he's in debt, and you are using or abusing his situation in order to get something out of him, to get a part of his body out of him. Another concern that it is against human dignity. وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. God honored human beings. And it is against the dignity of a human being to be used as a spare part for the people who can afford it. It has also got a negative effect on, such a system will have a negative effect on promoting related and deceased donation, and I will tell you about the experience in Kuwait. And of course, there's also a lot of concern about the well-being of donors. In many situations, these living unrelated donors are not really looked after very well before, and very rarely are followed up properly after surgery. Most of these people, for example, in Kuwait, most of the donors, after donating and getting the sum of money, they disappear from the country. They go back to their own countries, and you can never make sure that they get a long-term follow-up. Now, if you extend this system to donating other organs like liver, such as this patient, if you look at the incision of this person, it is not an incision for removing a kidney, but to remove part of the liver. Even the stakes and the dangers or the risk would be much higher, because we all know to donate part of your liver carries a higher risk of not only morbidity but also mortality. Now in Kuwait, before, about 10 years ago, we decided to open the door for living unrelated, forced by people who were traveling abroad to buy kidneys in various countries and coming back with lots of problems. And as you can see, year by year the numbers increased, going to India, Egypt, Pakistan and other countries. And then we said, since the law allows donation without payment, let us open the door. And a committee was formed by the Minister of Health, and this committee met the so-called donors, who mostly claimed an emotional relationship with the recipients. Over 10 years, the committee met about 800 prospective living unrelated donors and accepted about 600 of them to donate their kidneys, and eventually only about 250 donated. This means that not all the people who went through the committee were really serious people, or maybe there was a dispute between the recipient and the donor regarding the payment. Who were the donors? Well, the donors came from different parts of the world. As I said in my earlier talk, that 2/3 of the population of Kuwait are expats, and in fact the majority came from Egypt, followed by Syria. So what happened 10 years later? We did manage to increase the number of transplants. The number of the number of living related kept increasing, but you can see that the number of living related, which is in blue, dropped after opening the door for living unrelated, and this is one of the disadvantages of Now, who were these donors? Were they real altruistic donors? We did a study, and in this study we interviewed 50 of the recipients, because most of the donors left the country. We interviewed the recipients, 50 of the recipients randomly, and 48 accepted to participate in the study. And we wanted to find out if the patient, how long was the patient on dialysis before the transplantation? Did they have living related donors who offered kidneys to them? And how much was the donor paid or not paid? Now this slide shows that you can see that majority of the patients who received living unrelated were either on dialysis for less than 6 months, or even many of them were preemptive transplantation. So this means that they wouldn't even wait on dialysis for a period of time. Were the potential family donors? Yes. In fact, the majority of them had either brothers or sisters, or they had children who could be potential donors for them. Did the family offer donation? And this was surprising, because we found that nearly 85.5% of the patients did have an offer from their family to donate, and they refused. Why did they refuse? Because there is a living unrelated donor available. Were they paid? Well, all except for 2 admitted paying the donor, and the average price was about $36,000 US. Sorry, average price was $17,000, and the price reached up to $36,000. Did this system stop people going abroad to receive or to buy kidneys? No, it didn't. People continued. Why did they continue? This was surprising to me as well. And then I found out some of the people were even reluctant to go through a committee, to bring their donors through a committee which might or might not accept them. So they found it easier just to go abroad and buy a kidney in Pakistan or in Egypt. All these ethical and medical and religious issues led to an international concern. And this, of course, as you probably know and you are mostly aware, led to a meeting, and I think a lot of leaders of transplantation in the GCC and also in the Middle East were involved in this meeting and in preparing for this meeting, which was in Istanbul and in 2008, which basically led to the Declaration of Istanbul. And the Declaration of Istanbul can be summarized in two things: to stop using the poor as a source of organs for the rich, and to maximize the deceased donation to reach self-sufficiency of organs and tissues needed for transplantation. And more than 115 organizations from all over the world have accepted this declaration and supported this declaration, including the Saudi Society of Transplantation and Kuwait Transplant Society, and also Middle East Society for Organ Transplantation. Not only the Istanbul Declaration enforces and discourages commercialism, but also the 63rd World Health Assembly, which was attended by the Minister of Health from different parts of the world, which met in May of last year, and again, the same message. Should we stop living unrelated? Well, to my opinion, to stop commercialism, you should stop it, but you cannot stop that because there are some people who genuinely want to donate to their friends and to their, or as a pure altruism. So can we regulate it in a way to stop commercialism? I think we can. We should have independent ethics committee. In the past in Kuwait, we used to have a committee which met the donors who were mostly transplant specialists, and now we have this has changed with a lot of pressure on the ministry to change this situation, and now we have an independent ethics committee with ethicists and with physicians who are not involved in transplantation. I believe that we should keep the patient on a waiting list for a while for deceased before allowing them to have a living unrelated, and then we should screen the families for a possible suitable donors. And lastly, of course, we should the real solution is to promote deceased donation. And by reaching self-sufficiency and maximizing deceased donation, we need legislation, we need government support in the form of budget and regulation, which is lacking in this part of the world, unfortunately. We need organ procurement organizations, we need training, and we need public educations, and also incentives by reimbursement of the donors, funeral expenses, and other incentives, which is not, this is not the time to discuss it because I'm discussing living unrelated. And this is the final slide. I think it is important to remember that in each human being there is a little tyrant. And when you become a tyrant, you try to abuse those people who are either weaker than you are or less rich as you are. So I think we should the message I want to deliver to you, it is not a good idea, and it is not something which we should really support, paying a poor person in return for taking part of his body. You can pay him if he is poor without any conditions, but you should not really put conditions of removing part of his body for this one. So إن الإنسان لا يطغى أن رآه استغنى. Those people who become rich and powerful, they start abusing others. Thank you very much.